Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now, to the show at hand.
Matt Zalk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business leaders and real estate experts. Past guests on our show include Mark Marquin talking about mortgage lending, business mortgage lending, Jay Conner talking about raising private money, and Darren Huang, who has 100 units under management and a host of industrial properties, talking about transitioning his business from single family to industrial and doing renovations on his single family units. Today's episode is brought to you by Chris Lyle State Farm. Chris Lyle State Farm helps you protect your most precious assets and investments, whether it's your home and auto, investment, rental properties, or other valuables. Call Chris Lyle State Farm for a quick and painless phone call to potentially save you double digits on all of your insurance needs. Visit diallyle.com or call his office at 918-878-7771. Today's episode is also brought to you by Keyrenter Property Management. At Keyrenter Property Management, we are a full-service property management company helping our clients buy, renovate, and operate real estate assets. We help our clients build wealth while taking the headache out of property management. We have people like Barnabas Whitaker, who you're going to hear from today on the show, who help us routinely, efficiently, and for a reasonable price so that our clients can get turns done quicker and get more money back into their pockets. That's why no matter what rental you have, single family homes, condos, townhomes, apartments, we have the management solutions you need. Go to keyrenterpmc.com or email us at info@keyrenterpmc.com. Before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Kristen Garza, a former colleague of ours over at Keyrenter. She brought Barnabas into our orbit, and I like to say our colleagues may come and go, but each person brings with them many great folks in their network, and we're grateful for the introductions that Kristen made while at Keyrenter, while she worked alongside us in the trenches. She's now over at Appfolio, working in client support, and we're grateful for Kristen and everything that she did while she was working with us in the business. Today's guest is Barnabas Whitaker of Whitaker Ventures. Barnabas started his business as a side hustle in 2018 while he was still working as a helicopter paramedic. In 2019, he left his career of nearly a decade in fire and emergency services to pursue building his business full-time. As a company, he's still mostly small family business, or mostly, I should say, a small, mostly family business working with his brothers. They're equipped with a large collection of trucks, trailers, tractors, and tools for meeting a variety of home and job site needs. Originally, his goal was to do remodels and handyman type of work, but as opportunity and interest changed, now he's primarily doing junk hauling, tree service, trash outs, yard recovery, roll-off, dumpster rental, and a bunch of other property management services. He does a ton of work with us and our team at Keyrenter. Barnabas Whitaker, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Great to have you on. I want to talk for a second. Let's start at the beginning. You mentioned leaving your career in working as a helicopter paramedic. What led you into the side hustle of doing the work that you're doing now?
Well, I kind of circled back to what I used to do before I started my EMS career, like 12, 15 years ago. I worked for my dad and all my neighbors and stuff, just doing all things labor. And then I got out of that and went in and out of college until I figured out what I wanted to do. And then it was started volunteer firefighter, then EMT paramedic, worked for IMSA here in town locally for like 7 years or so, then some rural county EMS, and then helicopter EMS. Flight medic is where I ended my career at. But about a year and a half before I left my helicopter job, I started my business and kind of just started doing it as a side hustle so I could get back to working with my brothers, collaborating with them because they both did the same thing. My primary crew was me and my two brothers, and they both had, similar to me, about 10-year careers in other jobs, and then we all slowly went back to what we used to do when we were younger, and so now we all work together. And the reason I finally left my career is because I was kind of at the top of the clinical ladder for myself, and I was kind of burnt out on my job. A lot of hours away from home, a lot of trauma, a lot of that kind of stuff, and it's just I was ready to move on from it, and I could only go sideways. I could go to a fire department, to another service, but like it was kind of a terminal position for me, and I couldn't go up. I could go sideways. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I decided to make my side hustle my primary gig. And that was in late 2000 or early 2019, I think is when I left my career completely. Um,
When
okay.
did when did we meet? 2020?
I think 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
believe 2020.
shortly after you started. What was the hardest part about leaving a stable career at EMSA or just being a helicopter paramedic and venturing off onto your career in entrepreneurship?
It was really hard at first. Like, going from a 2 week paycheck that I could depend on, it was going to be at least this much money every 2 weeks. And at the time, my wife was still in nurse practitioner school, getting her DNP, and so she wasn't making very much money, and I was paying for everything. And so making that transition while she was still in school was really hard. I cashed out part of my 401k and bought my first little small truck and trailer that I still have. That's where it all started. Um, but it was rough at first. My credit score went from really good to pretty bad
Wow.
over that
Because you
first
put stuff on
year.
the credit card and then you just weren't able to pay it off until you kind of established the business more?
Well, it was even worse than that. I was kind of back to when I was like basically 20 years old, picking which bill I would pay on time
Yeah. Yeah.
for a short period of time. It was like that, and it was kind of a struggle because my I could always go back to IMSA if I wanted to and
Sure.
walk into a good job and get a signing bonus and all of that, and that was
So
tempting, but
tempting.
I did not want to do it. And so
Yeah.
when my license expired, my medical license expired, my paramedic license, I was relieved because the temptation wasn't there anymore. And I just had to keep on doing the grind. And then, it got easier once I got, I was a lot of learning lessons and, because I just bootstrapped it and I didn't really know what I was doing. Still don't know what I'm doing, but figuring it out little by little. Um, I say I don't know what I'm doing. I'm learning, but and
You're
it's
pretty
obviously it's
good.
going well. And in four
Well,
years, I have a fleet now, a small fleet, but still,
yeah.
like I started
Yeah.
with the F-150 and a small trailer, and now I've got two 350s, a 150, and a Isuzu dump truck, and trailers to go with each one,
Yeah.
and
What
roll
what
off
were some of the
dumpsters. All that.
what were some of the early lessons that you picked up in your entrepreneurial journey?
Um, well, when I first started it, I wanted to do more like remodel contracting and handymanning type of stuff, and it didn't take me very long to realize that I did not want to do that. There was too much. I don't like spending so much time on a single job. And when you're doing remodel work, I know you've experienced this from a different angle, but like you don't know what you're getting into until you tear a wall or a floor out. And
Yeah.
then when you have to take that back to the clients and say, hey, this is the situation, it's going to be more money. People don't like that, understandably, but like
Yeah.
you can't really just endure whatever that extra cost is going to be on your own. So you have to renegotiate the situation. And I didn't like that. And the maintenance on the tools, and I really that's was part of the reason why it was so hard for me to get off the ground was like the amount of money I'm spending on materials and tool maintenance. It was hard to make to be profitable on a lot of jobs, and even I would be the profit would be there, but it would be in a month, 2 months before I would actually make any money. Because even getting half of an installment, that really only covers your basis for
Yeah.
operating for that job. It doesn't cover any of your other overhead. And so that was pretty hard to overcome as a small new business.
Yeah.
Um, so I still
How
do a little bit of contracting work in that capacity, but like fence building, different things like that. I don't like remodel. I won't mess with it anymore.
how many jobs did you do at limited profit before you decided you weren't going to do that anymore? I know that you, like, for example, have told me in the past you don't want to do jobs where you have to go pick up materials and wait in line and, you waste a whole bunch of time doing stuff. You'd rather do the jobs that require only the materials that you naturally keep, which are tons. I mean, you keep a ton of crowbars and, all the tools that you need to break things up, and your dumpsters and your trucks and your people, but you don't want to go be picking up, saws and, sawzalls and everything else.
Yeah. Well, that's easier now that I have multiple trucks. Because at first operating out of one rig was like, if I go from a hauling job to a tree job, that's not too different because you're disposing stuff and you
Yeah.
use the same tools. And I keep those tools on pretty much each of my trucks: chainsaws, hammers, rakes, all that stuff is pretty much equipped on every single truck. But then when you get into more specialty contracting tools, they take up a lot of space. They're vulnerable to theft.
Yeah.
And then you're always having to go from, okay, well, we're building a fence today and we're doing some drywall tomorrow and painting, and then tree work and junk hauling in between. It's really hard to re-equip each truck
Yeah.
um,
With different
between
stuff.
jobs. It's really inefficient. And so now with multiple vehicles, I can set each one up a little bit differently. And so I eliminate a lot of that inefficiency, but I still am only doing privacy fence building and very selective other type of jobs as far as that kind of contracting goes.
Do you have I mean,
One,
your two brothers are working with you. Do you have other folks that are running their own rigs, or is it just your brothers that are leading crews and you're leading a crew and are in charge of kind of the materials and the stuff on those trucks?
so my brothers, they can run crews for me. They can fill in as managers as I need them. And then I've got two other guys that are pretty consistently working with me, but they're not on my insurance policy as drivers. Because that changes my whole business model as far as being a small family business. It makes everything a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
And so keeping things to scale is pretty difficult, but it makes it a lot easier that my brothers can.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try to do as much of the prep work by myself that I can, as far as getting materials and doing all the entrepreneurial business side of things. But I've got to, at the scale I'm at now, I have to do that either before work or after work, or on the jobs that I can excuse myself from. I can use that time, but a lot of times it just means I'm working really long days, so I can make sure I can. It's hard to find a place to be where I can be the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician all where I need to be, and delegate where I can.
I mean, entrepreneurship is all about long hours, at least in my experience, for the first bunch of years that you're in the business. My question though is, I hate, in our business, we keep some inventory of materials and I hate doing it. Occasionally, we'll get an opportunity to buy something stupid like 25 pre-hung doors at some crazy discount that we can pass on to our owners, or a bunch of window units for the summer. And I hate inventorying that stuff, because even if you imagine that theft doesn't exist, things walk off and fall off and just disappear without any real consequence to anybody except the person that paid for them. How do you deal with stuff, your rakes and chainsaws on your rigs, and how do you keep accountability for those things so they're not just walking off?
I definitely do have some loss. But in general, I'm able to keep everything pretty safe. I recently bought a new piece of property that I'm going to develop, because right now I'm operating out of the house I live in. That's my business place too. And so there's a little bit of security in that, but it means that my yard is full of trucks and trailers and equipment. I've got a security system, and luckily in the neighborhood I live in, it's kind of rural. And both of my brothers live on the same block. And my dad does. And between all of us, we own like most of the surrounding lots, and everybody in the area knows who we are. And there's a lot of security in that.
Yeah.
We've got somewhat of a reputation in the neighborhood. And so we've been there for 32 years, I think, my family. And the same thing as before, like my brothers and I, we all moved away and then we all came back. And it's actually pretty great. We're just slowly buying out more and more, but that allows us there's a lot of security in it. And I'm hoping within 2 years, I'm going to have a shop built that's big enough for me to pull my biggest truck and trailer into, and still have room all around to like work on stuff and keep everything secured in its own little like workflow areas, so it's not cluttered. Like I can have fabrication stuff in this corner and auto stuff in this corner, and then storage for all my chainsaws and whatever, in organized fashion.
It's reminiscent. It's reminiscent of working on an ambulance, I guess. You like have to have things compartmentalized in your different work areas for different things.
That workflow, I'm trying to get that, because it's hard to have it right now with working out of my house. It's just hard to have everything in its own designated space in a way that's not just stacking everything on top of itself. And it's hard.
We've often thought when we interview new maintenance techs or new vendors that the way they organize their truck is an indication of the way they're going to organize their work orders for us and treat clients and everything else. If things look just totally disheveled and thrown in and everything dinged up, it's one thing. And if things are organized in their place, then their minds are also organized. They can keep work orders organized and keep tenants organized. And that's kind of the way we've operated in the past for hiring new maintenance techs and new vendors. I want to ask you about kind of your routine. One thing that we hear from owners pretty consistently is that our services cost too much. They say, on this pod, we've often talked to contractors and asked them to describe in detail how a typical job goes so that any client listening might come to understand that the work of repairing their properties to rent-ready condition can be more intensive and time-consuming than they may have thought. And they often say, why does it take 3 hours to repair a patch of sheetrock? And it just is. Kind of as I described earlier, and I've described on the show before, you have to put a little 2x4 behind and screw that in. Then you've got to put a sheetrock. You got to cut the right piece. You've got to mud and tape. You've got to wait for it to dry. You've got to go back and do a layer of mud and tape potentially, or just mud potentially. Then you might have to texture it. Then you might have to sand it, maybe not in that order. And then finally you have to paint it. People are like, why does it take so long? It's like, well, there's a ton of steps. In a similar way, I know you do all sorts of work, and I'm grateful for everything that you do with Keyrenter and everything we do with you. But can you walk us through a typical day of a medium-sized cleanup job to help our owners understand? I mean, they see a line item on a bill, on an owner statement at some point, and they don't really understand what all is entailed in doing a medium-sized cleanup job. It might be, and maybe you can set the scene for us, but where you remove the leftover personal contents of a house that we may have evicted a tenant, or may have absorbed a tenant, or maybe they just moved out and just left a bunch of stuff potentially. I've seen some pretty bad things. So maybe just to set the scene, I'll let you describe what's left in the house so that our audience has an idea of what a medium-sized cleanup job would still have remaining in the property. Go.
Yeah. Okay. So I always send at least 2 people on a job for safety reasons, and also for, there's a lot of things that you just can't move by yourself safely. So safety for as far as not being alone on a job and vulnerable to criminal activity, or also for loading the work aspect of it. So there's always at least 2 billable workers there. And then as far as on the job itself, the job doesn't start or end when we show up at a job site, because everything's got to be prepared. Travel time in a diesel. Most of my vehicles are diesel, and that's expensive. And then, so most jobs, just a smaller, medium-sized, typical trash out, will use, even if I don't completely fill a load, you have to assume that I've got to pay to dump that load. Mm-hmm. And that's one, waiting in line at the dump. And the minimum charge is $50. And that gets you up to 1 ton. And then it goes up from there by weight. And then another thing is special items that have to be disposed of either with extra money or extra steps. Paint, I can't just dump at the dump. I have to either dry it out or take it to a special place. So that's just extra steps. But mattresses, everyone leaves behind mattresses. Those cost $10 each to dump extra. Tires cost, I think, $7 to $15 each, depending on how big they are. People are always leaving their tires because they don't want to pay to dump it. So they're leaving them behind.
Yeah.
But then, just even an hour on the job site, it's still at least another hour before the job site and after the job site. A lot of times more than that after, because again, driving to the appropriate dump facility, waiting in line, getting it dumped, and then getting back to where we're green to go for another job. So that's a pretty typical experience. So that job is going to cost typically $300. Conservatively $300 if it takes that. Sometimes it's small and we don't have to dump after it, and we can do multiple, but I can't always count on that being the case, because even if it doesn't completely fill the load, I can't take that to another job, because if it means that I'm driving to Broken Arrow or somewhere and with a partially full load, and that means that I have to go to the dump and then go back to that job site, I can't ethically charge that owner more because of that inefficiency that was caused from trying to save a buck on the previous job.
Sure.
So that's kind of a dilemma, kind of a logistical situation. But does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, but then tell us, if you go to a medium-sized job, what are you hauling out? Like, is it 2 mattresses and couches and dressers, and what is it, are you cleaning out food? Are you like, what's the typical clean out job entail?
People, so almost always if they left stuff behind, they leave food in the refrigerator. They, I guess, assume that the deposit's gone, whatever. So they just all or nothing. Almost always food in the refrigerator. If the power is out, that's a nasty job,
Oof.
because it just sits and rots and it smells awful and it takes time. We don't like clean the refrigerator, but we empty everything out and at least like dry towels slop it out. It's
Yeah.
disgusting.
Yeah.
It's hold your nose, open the fridge, get as much done as you can, close
Yeah.
it, take a breath, and do it again.
Yeah.
And that's like heavy. You got to do it in barrels, and that's heavy and gross. People like the drawers and cabinets also take a lot of time because it's not a lot of volume, but you've got to go through every single drawer and cabinet. And in these situations, usually each one is full.
Yeah.
And then, lots of bulky items. People leave, they're behind their furniture. Dog kennels are a big one, and mattresses. But usually, there's just a bunch of scattered trash throughout, and then bulky items that we've kind of got to strategically load and stack, kind of Tetris of sorts, to make sure we can get it done. And depending on access, a lot of times that means we've got to take the front door off or go out the back door and carry large items around.
Sure.
And that can be tedious and a pain in the butt, or using the dolly.
So after you do the clean out, you just basically broom sweep the house and lock up and on to the next job?
Yeah, pretty much. We don't do like the cleaning service, but we give it a push broom sweep, and then lock up, make sure anything we opened, we close, and move on to the next one.
Beautiful. So you and I have been working together, and particularly in 2021 and 22, we worked very closely together on a bunch of clean outs that were rather horrendous. We have a client that sorry, I don't know why I'm not on focus. We had a client that bought a 64 unit package that was in pretty rough shape. Can we talk about some of the worst clean outs that we did? Particularly there's one on 49th Street North that was quite horrendous, but I want to hear some of your take on I sometimes got word back from you like that was a doozy. And I know if you're calling to say that was a doozy, that must have been a real doozy. For any normal human being, that would be like something unspeakable, but you're just kind of roll with the punches. Tell us about some of the worst ones that you've seen working on Keyrenter properties.
That one was probably the worst one I've seen. And the situation there was that it had been abandoned for a long time and people had been squatting in it with no utilities. And just, there was a lot of evidence of drug use and just living in the worst conditions imaginable. And like some of the things that we saw there were toilet buckets everywhere. And, I saw that on the first walkthrough when I first talked to you about it, and I kind of painted a picture of how bad it was. But it got worse from there, because the things I didn't see until we started working on it was like I said, there was toilet buckets in every room of the house. But one particular closet that I didn't open on the first walkthrough was pretty much the designated bathroom closet. It was disgusting. It was so saturated that the floor beneath it, the wood floor, was like rotting out from body fluids.
Oh my
God.
God.
It just, like, opening the door, it just erupted this awful stench throughout the entire house. I've got a strong stomach. My brother has a strong stomach for this kind of stuff. Both of us vomited on this job. I did with that. He vomited because we knew there was one dead dog because it was just in the backyard in plain sight. And it wasn't too bad. It was like decomposed, but it had been like out, exposed to the sun and drying out naturally. And it wasn't that bad. It was still gross, but not that bad. We found another one that there was like this, I think it was a swimming pool, like a above ground swimming pool that had just been like rolled up in a ball. And, we throw those away all the time. They are usually one season use for most people. Obviously, it's been there for a long time, but I guess the people rolled up a dead dog in it. And so one got to bake in the sun and it was trapping all the moisture. So it was just this nasty, sleuthing, decomposing, but not really going anywhere. It was nasty. So my brother accidentally unrolled that out without expecting it to be there, and he vomited there. It was awful. And then I helped him take care of it. But for either one of us to get sick like that is pretty uncommon. Like we do gross things all the time. And for one of us to actually vomit is insane. For both of us doing the same job from different
two guys that have worked both as paramedics and have seen a lot of blood and gore, to vomit is pretty intense.
Yeah, it was awful. That's the worst of it. We've seen dead animals on other jobs, and the refrigerators can always be bad. Lots of squatter houses have the toilet buckets. That's pretty gross things that we see routinely.
Do you ever wonder why you still work with Keyrenter after we give you such crazy jobs?
Well, it's one of those situations where I don't get to just pick and choose the gravy jobs. Yeah, exactly. With the bad comes the good, and then good with the bad. So it's Keyrenter is my biggest client in the group by a pretty large margin, and I've got to protect that, but that means that I can't just say no to the jobs that I don't want to do. And even when they're bad, they're still kind of fun. They're good stories. They're good experiences. Totally. You get past the gross of it.
Yeah. Recently you were working on my personal residence. We took we bought a house, and it was in perfectly good shape. It had really nice stuff in it, and we just destroyed the whole thing. Took it down to the studs, and you had a bunch of guys there working sheetrock, siding. There was stone being pulled down. I mean, you guys were doing everything, insulation, the whole deal. Let's talk for a second about your procedure with your team on PPE, protective gear, to make sure that everybody stays healthy. What do you guys generally do to make sure you're not inhaling stuff that's too bad, or not cutting yourself or whatever else?
Baseline every single day, even when it's 110 degrees, we're wearing long pants, sturdy boots, and usually long sleeves. And it gets hot. But that's just for pretty much standard operations. But when we have pretty nasty jobs or any kind of like airborne risks or anything like that, we've got masks in the truck all the time that are available. And then on specific jobs, I'll prepare for them. We don't do it very often, but we can get the disposable Tyvek suits that can be worn and then just thrown away after. And respirators, gloves, got a collection of hard hats for when we need them. So when we don't use that stuff every single day, besides like just the typical workwear, sturdy workwear is very important for us. But it's always available, and we kind of usually there's a little bit of we know what to expect when we get that kind of job that might have some extra hazards, so we can kind of prepare for it.
Yeah. Tell me about some key lessons that you've learned, takeaways from your experiences. What did you not know 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and have since changed your habits, behaviors, work style, whatever? I mean, a la the walking into a closet and seeing a toilet, or unrolling a disposable pool, and finding a dog, God forbid. Like what have you learned, and how have you changed what you do as a result?
A lot of things, really. We're always changing how we do things based on how when we have an experience that could have gone better, we always adapt a little bit. But being prepared for jobs is important, and like making sure after work day is done, everyone's tired and wants to just get in their trucks and go home, but making sure that we stay long enough to prepare for the next day with the minimum things that can't be immediately done. Like in the morning, we always go through the routine and getting stuff ready, but charging batteries, if I'm behind on batteries when we start a job, we're going uphill all day long. And that's a huge pain in the butt, because we use a lot of battery powered equipment. Like, I've got a few $1,000s in gas chainsaws, but mostly I use battery powered chainsaws because they're less wear and tear on my body. They're not as hard, as loud. We don't have to mess with as much gas and oil and stuff like that. And they're less powerful, but in general, we don't really need the extra power, unless we're doing like a big tree takedown. But anyway, so preparedness about stuff like that, making sure we're not showing up to a job site missing things or with batteries that are not charged. And because if you've got a 3, 4, 5 person crew, and you have to go get something, you lose your profit margin real fast. You got $100 an hour of labor just standing there waiting for a tool or something like that. That's absolutely that hurts for that. And in that same vein, gathering materials for like privacy fences or whatever, I try to do that stuff without the crew unless I need a helper for loading or stuff like that, because there's so many times when I'll do my part and order online and call and make sure it's ready, and then I show up and it's still not ready. Actually, I dealt with that. You dealt with that when we were doing your project.
Yeah,
the lumber was supposed to be ready, and I waited for a while, and then I ended up going back that evening to get the lumber for you. So that preparedness is a big one, and then making things more efficient, or doing things where I can do it with just myself or one or two people instead of a whole crew, to protect the profit margin a little bit.
Yeah.
And some other things. It makes it easier. Some of that stuff, when I used to be just working out of one vehicle, it was really hard to go from one type of job to the next. And there's just tools on top of tools, and it was really felt like spinning our tires a lot. But no, it is nice that I can pretty much, we can do one type of work, and then even if we don't have time to run to the dump or tree dump or whatever, we can just come back to the house and get a different truck that is equipped for the other kind of work.
Yeah.
And one of my roll-off dumpsters is, you've seen it, it's the short-walled one that's like a little bit more reinforced for hauling like rocks and shingles and stuff like that. Actually, a lot of times I use that for like my materials, because I can just fill it with concrete and fence posts and pickets and all the stuff that I need for a fence job, and drop it off on a job site. And I can do that before, in the evening, the day before the job starts or whatever. So that's things like that really help be more efficient. Some of the other things is like assessing a job and talking to people. One question that gets frustrating is when someone calls me about a job. I'm like, hey, how much do you charge for a truckload? Well, it's not that simple. Like, a load of what? Like, if it's 3 couches, that'll fill up my 20-yard trailer pretty quickly, and it's easy. I have help, but that's fast and easy. If it's shingles that are spread all around a house from a tear out, that takes me all day long. It's a lot of weight, and it's an expensive dump fee. So it's just never that simple. And then looking at jobs, opening that closet. It's easy to just do a quick walk around and send an estimate, and then you find something. And construction debris piles can lie to you too. So there's all this insulation and drywall on top. Looks like no big deal. And then you start getting rid of it, and there's a bunch of bricks and heavy broke down stuff underneath it. It's like that changes the whole job.
How do you bid something like that? If you know it's a potential risk, you just pick up the stuff on the top and see if somebody's hiding something, or you just
poke through it a little.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second about anecdotes. We've talked a lot about disgusting anecdotes. Tell us some of the other fun things you found while cleaning out Keyrenter or other jobs. If you Google Barnabas Whitaker, you're going to find him in the news quite a bit. A bystander of some crime that ended nearby, or a hero story of various sorts. Tell us, Barney. Tell us about some fun things that you found.
One of the most interesting ones was a dinosaur, a velociraptor statue that was stolen several years ago from a local place on Route 66 called Decapolis. And I remember the story coming out years ago when it happened. Someone just walked off with the statue of a velociraptor. And well, we did a trash out for Keyrenter, and we found that there. And at first I thought it was cool, and we just set it aside because I didn't want to throw it away. And then when we got it back to the house, it was actually one of my niece and my nephew. They recognized it from being from Decapolis. Yeah, because they replaced it after they gave up on trying to find it. But so that was kind of cool. We got to reach out to them and had this we returned it to them. We got to take the kids in the truck and everything. And so that was a pretty fun experience for them. And the Decapolis, they were thrilled to have it back. Had a little bit of damage to it, but mostly they were just glad to have it back.
And you got a little promo spot in the newspaper.
Yeah, that was cool.
I don't recall reading that you did any promotion for the business in that newspaper article, but it was your name. I didn't, for sure.
Yeah, I was a little bashful about it for whatever reason. I don't know. I didn't want to steal the kids' thunder and make it look like I was just doing a plug, which I probably should have done. But it was more fun just to let the kids do their thing.
Yeah. Any other fun stuff that you found? Isn't the dream to find like a sack of gold behind a wall somewhere? I guess that never really happens, right?
that would be great, but it hasn't happened yet. If one of my guys found it, they didn't tell me about it. We get lots of tools. We try to sell stuff when we can, sell it, recycle, donate, whatever. A lot of it, unfortunately, just has to go to the landfill just because it's, I can't keep a profitable business running by hoarding everything and trying to make a dollar out of every single item. But we have a big garage sale a couple times a year, and that usually brings in a decent amount of change. Just storing everything for that sucks. We donate a lot of stuff. A lot of tools.
I would suspect a lot of stuff like half broken tools, like a lawnmower that needs a new this or new that, and everything sharpened before going on. It's like, what do you do with that? You can keep it for 6 months, sell it for $50, or you can put it in the trash. Either way, it's not an ideal solution because it doesn't have that much value.
Well, and there's a lot of people who are like tinkerers and they like to fix things, and that's cool. But then you have ones where you walk in the door and you know immediately this is drug behavior. Like people who are strung out for periods of time on meth, like they want to take everything apart and they think that they're gonna build a robot or fix these things. And so you walk in and there's like all these tools and electronics that are just taken apart, and you got to assume that most of it's stolen, just from the state of everything else. But like we walk into these and it's like copy and paste. You see the same thing in different places, and so it's like patterns that you recognize with addiction and evictions, and just when you see people's lives kind of fall apart, unfortunately, like doing some of these trash outs, when someone moves out of their home for whatever reason, like it's almost like reading somebody's journal between the things that you find and the signs and things that you see. You can see a progression of this was a happy family home, and then something happened.
Oh man.
You can usually see whether it was an addiction got out of control, or relationship falling apart, or job loss, and a lot of times several of those things in a progression or regression, I guess. And then next thing you know, you're cleaning out all the remaining items from their home that they left behind. It's pretty sad to see, but you copy and paste that story over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. The surprising thing about the shopping carts full of dismantled electronics is that I find that same behavior in my 3-year-olds or my 4-year-olds. I'm like, are you guys on meth? Because you seem to be taking a lot of things apart and not putting them back together. There's like a strange similarity between toddler behavior and drug use. I'm like, you cannot put all that stuff in the shopping cart. My kid's Ariana. I'm like, Ariana, Simone, you cannot cart all that stuff around in the shopping cart. You just dismantled the entirety of your toys, and now you're just wheeling it around the house like a lunatic. What's going on here? Tell me the real issue behind the scenes. But funny. I've noticed that similarity between drug users and 4-year-olds. It wasn't that long ago that you ended up kind of expanding your business and buying those trailers. I mean, I remember you sending me pictures of those things. They just arrived there clean and freshly painted, and the Max D's arrived at your house. What led you what led you doing that, and has it been helpful and profitable in expanding your business?
It's been great. So it's something that I had on the back burner for a while that I wanted to invest in, but just getting the capital available and pulling the trigger on it was that took quite a while. But when one of my biggest clients were doing like the remodels and stuff, they were wanting to switch to dumpsters for the remodel part. We do the trash outs and all that stuff for them. But when they wanted to switch to dumpsters, that was enough inclination for me to go ahead and pull the trigger on it and get that started, because that was a really good client of mine, and it's something I already wanted to do. And if I was going to lose a good client for something that I was going to do anyway, like, nope, that's enough initiative for me to get going, or enough for me to take the initiative to get it going. And that's been really great. New learning curve, of course, and everything. And I had to get another truck because I didn't want to use my Suzu diesel with the dump bed. That's my primary workhorse. I didn't really want to have to tie it up with that. So that meant another truck. So I got a gooseneck, an F-350. At first, I just bought what I could get with cash because I had to use my financing to get the trailer setup going, and that was pretty expensive. The initial one I got was 4 roll-off dumpsters and the trailer itself. So it was a pretty big, sizable loan. And then I bought like a farm truck, an old F-350, like a 2000, for F-350 that was just a farm vehicle.
Yeah.
And I still have it. It's basically a backup truck now. But then I kind of waited. Truck market is crazy.
Crazy.
The blue book value on trucks is just a joke. Like, but I ended up flying to Virginia to buy my current my newer F-350. It's not new. It's a 2016. But I had some criteria that I was looking for, and luckily I was in a position that I could be patient finding the right truck. But I wanted a diesel, and I needed either a dually or a 4-wheel drive, and I had some other things that I kind of wanted. But I flew across the country, and even with the airfare, hotel stay, and diesel getting across the country when it was $5 a gallon, it still was a better decision to do that than buy something that I could find locally.
What's the next investment you'll make in your business to kind of increase profitability and keep your guys busy and scale further?
The next investment I want to do, it's not going to increase profitability really, but I just bought some land that I've had my eye on for quite a while. That's really close to where I live because I've been running my business out of my house, off of my property. I've got it's a little over 3 acres, but it's trucks and trailers everywhere, and all of my stuff everywhere. And it's kind of hard to have nice landscaping with your business in your front yard. But so I got a new piece of land. Really, I can throw a rock at it from my house, which is nice. But I want to build a shop there. Got a lot of work to do before I can do that, but that'll be a pretty big investment. As far as like what's going to make us more money, though, I think the next thing I want to invest in is actually a mobile tire shop van, a Sprinter van that's equipped for doing tires. And that's actually because for several reasons. With my fleet, I'm spending on average of like $600 a month on tires.
Wow.
Because I usually have to replace them in pairs, and every trailer tire, they're high ply, big, expensive tires. They're about $300 each.
Yeah.
And they're just, and all my trucks and trailers are all big tires. But the amount of money I'm spending on that, I kind of like the idea of getting into this business because I'll save a lot of money on that side. And also it's one that I think I'll get set up where my primary crew are all cross-trained in running it, but it's a business that will mostly be independent of my regular operations. So it's not going to take away from it. So that's the next thing I want to do. And not the type where it's like roadside rescue, do the business model where you call and we show up to either your home or workplace and change your tires so you don't have to go sit in the lobby of a tire shop for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to do that type of business. That's the next like profitable endeavor I want to get into. But a lot of now I've got to maintain things. I've grown a lot, and with that has been a huge learning curve, and there's always maintenance that needs to be done. And if you don't make time for maintenance, it will make you make time for it.
Yeah. I always say in our business, you gotta have capacity to build capacity. It's like you gotta have the time to maintain your fleet, but you often don't have that time. So you got to make it. Otherwise you run into trouble. Barney, I got to tell you a story. When I was a young boy, and I told you this before, my grandfather used to always tell me it may be dirty work, but it's clean money when I didn't want to do the job. Of course, he was paying me like, I don't know, $2 an hour or something like that. But I have to say, again, that our entire Keyrenter team is grateful for the hard work that you guys do to make our lives easier and our owners' properties better suited for hopefully the next great renter that's coming in. It's not always clean work or even work that doesn't make you vomit, I should say. But with your team's hard work, we're always one step closer to that goal. So I really am grateful for everything that your team does.
Well, likewise, it's been great working with you guys, and I hope I can keep doing that for a long time.
Till we're old and gray. That beard should just keep growing.
Well, maybe not that long, but
I'm already going gray here. We've been talking to Barnabas Whitaker of Whitaker Ventures. They help us with junk hauling, tree service, trash outs, yard recovery, roll-off, dumpster rental, and a bunch of other property management services. Barney, great chatting with you. Thank you for being on the pod with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. It was a pleasure.
Take care, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.